The following contains spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul. You have been warned. Greetings, fellow mortals. I don't know about you, but there was one twist in Breaking Bad that didn't sit with me at all. Most of the character development and major events in the show left me reeling after watching them for the first time. Most of them even stuck with me for long periods of time. Even now, I can go back and examine all of the major death scenes in order to examine why they felt so powerful to me. As such, you might think that it's odd that the one event in Breaking Bad that led to the most deaths caused me to break out into a fit of uncontrollable laughter the first time that I saw it. Now, I know that might sound cold of me. How dare I laugh at the idea of a plane crash? That's borderline sociopathic. Of course, here's the problem with Breaking Bad's plane crash. It wasn't real. I know, I'm breaking new revelations to you all. It was a fake tragedy. There wasn't actually an air collision that resulted in 167 people losing their lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, this is the part where you point out that nothing in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul is real. So, why do I care so much about the other death scenes of people who don't actually exist? Let's start at the beginning. There's a quote that I like to think about. The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. This was said by Joseph Stalin. Yeah, I know, not exactly the person most worthy of quoting considering the sheer number of people that he's responsible for killing. But his words ring disturbingly true. We humans know that there are horrific events happening all around the world. If we think about it on a regular basis, we'll cease to function. That's why we have to compartmentalize such facts. If it's not in our perimeter, it gets pushed to the back of our minds. That's how we function while there is still starvation, war, terrorist attacks, slavery, and sex trafficking happening all around the world. We turn off our feelings and look at the numbers, because statistics are cold and unfeeling. None of this is to make you feel guilty about how you feel or react. Everyone functions this way. When a great number of people are hurt, we can't turn everything off to mourn if it doesn't affect us directly. If we did, humanity would cease to function. So if this is true in the real world, why should it be any different in the fictional worlds? This is the first problem of the plane crash. It involved so many unnamed, unseen fictional people that it's hard to feel any sort of investment into them. Even as we witness the planes crash above Walter's head, we don't feel its impact. None of the characters that we actually care about are directly involved. We don't know the people, personalities, or family members involved with the crash. If you did feel anything, I bet that it had to do with emotions associated with real-life tragedies and plane accidents. In fiction, the writers need to work to make the audience care about imaginary people. If a group of fake individuals that we never see die, then it doesn't affect us, especially when it doesn't matter in the long run for the characters that we're following. Little change for Walter or Jesse because of the plane crash. That's why it would have been pointless for the show to randomly start listing statistics of how terrible meth addiction is. It wouldn't hit home. Instead, the writers showed individuals who were affected by drug addiction. Show, don't tell. It's one of the key aspects of storytelling. Showing the abused child in the Peekaboo episode is a lot more effective than telling us how many people in a plane crash died. The writers at least had it happen directly above Walter's head so that we could see his reaction, but that leads to the second problem. Everything about the plane collision felt contrived. Walter was responsible for Jane's death. Jane's father was in air traffic control. Her death left him depressed. In his depression, Jane's father accidentally allowed the planes to crash. Thus, in a way, Walter allowed the plane crash to happen. Except that there was a few holes in that. It's a slippery slope type of argument that falls apart. For want of a single nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the kingdom was lost. That's a fun proverb about making sure to pay attention to the small details because of how important they are, but it's not very logical. There's a reason that we have systems to account for small failures. Do you know how many checks and balances there are in air traffic control? There are so many systems and people that are involved with flights that it's close to absurd. There's a reason that there are so few airplane accidents, especially involving anything other than equipment failure or pilot error, especially in commercial flights, especially in the United States of America. The amount of things that would have to go wrong is so astronomical that Walter is literally only one out of millions of pieces of straw that broke the camel's back. And Walter's straw was not the last one to be tossed onto the pile. So not only was the sequence of events so wild that it had little to do with Walter, the plane crash just so happened to occur directly above his house right after his family left him. The best way to make events occur in a story is to have it happen because of the character's decisions. Having the explosion happen above Walter was done to show what happened and to allow the various cold openings across the second season to make sense, but it's rather absurd and a statistical improbability, not to mention that it didn't matter to Breaking Bad's story in the long run. That's the third major problem. Besides a few references later, did the plane crash really change the event of Walter White's tale? No, not really. In fact, not at all. Everything that happened in Season 3 was going to happen whether there was a plane crash or not. All the writers wanted was to have a giant, violent explosion at the end of the season because they thought that Walter losing his family wouldn't be poignant enough. In fact, I think that it took away from the feelings of the emotion of the season finale and the intrigue of the cold openings involving hazmat workers at Walter's house. To be fair, let's compare the plane crash to other death scenes in that same show. Jane's death was brought about by Walter accidentally turning her onto her back while she was overdosing. He let her choke on her own vomit. It involved characters that we knew and were invested in. It was brought about by various choices made by the characters. It was deeply personal and in your face. The same thing could be said about Gail's death, or Gus's death, or Mike's death. Each murder happened because the various characters made decisions which fit their personalities to get to that point. The writers made sure that we were invested in the people involved. Each death caused major changes to the plot and character development moving forward in Breaking Bad. But perhaps that's a bit unfair. All of those deaths involved major characters. What about the murders of characters that we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with? Don, Eladio, and the rest of the cartel are a good example of this. We didn't know much about any of them, but Gus personally murdered all of them. In fact, Gus hated them so much and wanted revenge on his partner so badly that he willingly poisoned himself in order to get to them. He also put himself, Mike, and Jesse into a gunfight to pull his plan off. It was shocking, in your face, involved character choice, and has consequences which stretched out for the rest of the show. The same thing could be said about when Walter murdered 10 different people in 3 different prisons in the span of 2 minutes. We didn't know anything about those characters. We cared about them because Mike fought to keep them safe. We cared because it showed how far Walter had fallen. We cared because of the horrific violence being shown to us. It involved characters that we cared about, made logical sense for the people involved, and felt deeply personal. Not to say that it was the most emotional deaths in the world, but it was killing a group of characters in a way that felt more impactful than the plane crash. So how could we have made the plane crash more personal and impactful? Well, there's a few ways. The first thing that I can think of is that Jane's father should play a far more significant role. Donald only appeared a few times in season 2. Instead, make him show up far more often. Have him interact with Walter more. Have Donald assume that Walter is Jesse's father. Have them talk about drug addiction. Have Walter note that his cancer made him understand what it feels like to have nothing else to live for, and the desire to drown himself in something to numb the pain. Instead of being in air traffic control, make Donald a pilot. After Jane's death, he continues his spiral. Instead of going numb, he runs into someone selling Walter's product. He decides to see what feelings his daughter was willing to die for. He continues to use meth and other drugs when he goes back to work. Make sure to show a shot of all of the passengers on his plane. Make sure to show a few babies, a lot of children, and many women. Also, make the flight as diverse looking as possible in order to cast a wide net so that every possible member of the audience can latch onto someone. Instead of crashing into another plane, Donald crashes into the desert. His spiral and high made him give in to the suicidal thoughts, and he took the innocent people with him. After the crash, rapidly flip perspectives between the fallout and Walter sitting peacefully by the pool. Then, in the next season, show the fallout of the plane crash by having the DEA cracking down in the area more, to the point that Heisenberg has become public enemy number 1. That's one of the many reasons that Walter has no choice but to work for Gus. If the writers did this, it would tie into the themes of the show better and demonstrate the fallout of Walter's meth cooking. I'm not saying that this is a perfect idea. Truthfully, I'd prefer to take the whole plane situation out of the show. I'd prefer if they went with Donald committing suicide alone, but I'm just throwing out ideas to fix what already exists. And you have to give it to the Breaking Bad / Better Call Saul writers. This is the only time that something so outrageous happened in the shows or the El Camino movie. Most stories of this magnitude have far more stumbles than this. That's why the plane crash stands out so much in my mind. The Breaking Bad universe is a carefully constructed series of events. I hold everything about the show in the highest of regards. It's what made me so critical of the plane scene. What did you think about the plane crash? Leave a comment below telling me if you like the initial storyline or prefer one of my changes. I want to know if you think that the airline collision measured up to the rest of the show. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, remember that I'll be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.